Hey everyone, and welcome back to another news alert. My name is Jimmy Boyd, and thank you so much for tuning into Boyd News. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more updates like this. And feel free to support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee. Links are in the description below the video. Well, good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are watching this Ukraine news update from. We've got a lot of information to unpack in today's video. We will spend a lot of time talking about this current U.S. peace plan for Ukraine. I have tons of details to give to you, but based on what we're hearing today, major changes have been made to this peace plan after U.S., Ukrainian, and European delegations met yesterday in Geneva, Switzerland. Let's go over this new story here on your screen. It says U.S. and Ukrainian officials report progress on ending Russia's war. Top U.S. and Ukrainian officials said Sunday they'd made progress toward ending the Russia-Ukraine war, but provided scant details after discussing the American proposal. So this was a picture coming out from the meeting in Geneva, Switzerland yesterday between Ukrainian and U.S. officials. What we are hearing today is a lot of changes have been made to this U.S. proposal. Apparently, it is much more favoring Ukraine now. We're going to go over as much details as we can for you guys. I'm going to just jump right into this, start sharing the details with you. But before we get into it, just want to let you know, take everything with a grain of salt because there's so much information being passed around on different news outlets. And we're also hearing from Ukrainian officials today that there's a lot of conspiracies being passed around regarding the points to this peace plan. Okay, so we're going to try to show you whatever we can today. I've got a lot of information to cover. Let's go ahead and just jump right into this. We'll hop on over to next, and it says breaking: the 28-point plan no longer exists in its original form. Some points were removed, others were revised. This was reported by Alexander Bevs, advisor to the head of the presidential office following the negotiations in Geneva. Not a single remark from the Ukrainian side went unanswered, Bevs wrote on Facebook. He also noted there have been far more conspiracy theories around this than actual facts. So, just like I mentioned earlier, lots of conspiracies passing around regarding this whole peace plan. So, again, like I said, take everything with a grain of salt, but we've got multiple news outlets with information regarding this possible plan that we'll talk about today. So, yeah, this report talking about the fact that 28 points no longer exists in its original form. It's been heavily updated to support the Ukrainian side. We'll go over all those details and information today. Here's another one, Max 25. The negotiations on Sunday resulted in the peace plan being pared back to 19 points from its original 28, according to Financial Times. The people did not specify which elements had been removed. Here's a report today, Financial Times. U.S. and Ukraine reports progress in talks on peace plan. Proposal has been pared back from 28 points to 19. So apparently a bunch of them have been removed. We don't have too much information on what that exactly is yet. I'm sure sometime this week we will get more information. As soon as we do, give you guys some updates on that. But apparently a lot of things have been removed there. Now, Savchenko Volodymyr. Negotiations between the U.S. and Ukraine in Geneva yesterday almost collapsed before they even started. The atmosphere there was very tense. First Deputy Minister of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Galizia, Bloomberg writes that paragraph 14 about $100 billion in frozen Russian assets, 50% of the profits from which were to be received by the U.S., was removed from the agreement. Well, that's good. We actually heard about that late last week, that apparently that was going to be part of this peace plan. The U.S. was going to get something like 50% of a large portion of the Russian assets that are frozen in banks. And I was very curious as to why that would be. Why would the U.S. be profiting off that? Well, apparently that is gone now. What we're also hearing is these talks almost apparently collapsed at the very beginning due to a tense atmosphere. So it looks like that was resolved, because what we heard from U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio later during the day yesterday after these talks was that there was major progress that was made during these talks. So good to hear about that. Now, Vice Grad 24, Ukraine has outlined its red lines in peace negotiations after reviewing the U.S. peace plan. Verkhovna Rada Speaker Ruslan Stefanchuk specified Ukraine's non-negotiable points. Any restrictions on the size of the Ukrainian armed forces is unacceptable. Ukraine cannot be limited in its right to join alliances. The country will not recognize the loss of its territories, and Ukraine's NATO and EU accession must be part of future security guarantees. So these are all major points we've heard from Ukraine before. They're just coming out and confirming what their red lines are. So let me know what you think about some of these. Obviously, the restriction of the size of the Ukrainian armed forces is a big one. We keep hearing that the U.S. peace plan, along with Russia's coordination with this plan, was calling for Ukraine's army to be reduced something like 50% roughly. So apparently that's a large part of it. Them getting into NATO and also the EU, they want to be able to do that. They will never recognize the loss of their territories as Russian territory. So let me know what you think on those. Let's keep moving. Max 25, Zelensky's meeting with Trump is not planned this week, according to Suspilny, that's directly out of Ukraine. The war will end when Crimea is returned to Ukraine, Verkhovna Rada Chairman Ruslan Stefanchuk reported. So also Ruslan was claiming that the war will not end until Crimea is returned to Ukraine. That's what he's saying. Let me know if you think that's going to be the case. But also, we were hearing that sometime this week, Zelensky could be meeting with Trump to finalize these plans, and if Ukraine is going to be signing it along with the U.S. But we're still going to have to wait to see if the Russians will sign it as well, too, right? So, yeah, apparently there's no planned meeting this week between Zelensky and Trump. So I'm thinking maybe it will probably be next week when they will be meeting. We'll have to see what's going to happen with that. Now, next, the Telegraph leaks Europe's peace plan. Brussels offers its own version instead of Washington's. So I'm going to show you multiple reports from different mainstream news outlets today talking about this peace plan. So here's the Telegraph. It says they had published a draft of the European peace plan for Ukraine, an alternative to the U.S. proposal. It includes 24 points, and many of them look tougher in Kyiv's favor compared to the American version. Here's the key points. Full ceasefire and international monitoring, U.S. plus Europe satellites, drones on the ground inspections. Russia must return all deported Ukrainian children and all detained civilians. Exchange of all prisoners of war under the all-for-all formula. Ukraine receives legally binding security guarantees from the U.S., effectively a version of Article 5. That's a big one, security guarantees for Ukraine. No restrictions on the Ukrainian armed forces or the defense industry. Ukraine retains the right to invite allied troops and choose its own weapons. EU membership is guaranteed. NATO membership depends on alliance consensus, but the door remains open. Okay, so Ukraine could eventually be able to join NATO there. Ukraine regains control over Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and the Kakhovka Dam. Obtains free navigation on the Dnipro and the control over the Kinburn Spit. Territorial issues are discussed only after a full ceasefire and from the current line of control. No forced concessions. That's a huge one, too. We got to get a ceasefire before Ukraine and Russia start negotiating on any type of territorial concerns. Russia must pay reparations using its frozen sovereign assets, and then sanctions on Russia may be eased partially and gradually with an instant snapback mechanism. So I believe that snapback mechanism is going to be basically where if Russia attacks Ukraine again, these sanctions will go right back on. So if you guys want to screenshot this and go review it yourself, you're more than welcome to if you want to take a picture of the screen real quick. But 24 points here were added to this proposal, and we're not going to go over all these. That's way too much information, but these were some of the key points. Let me know what you think on this report from Telegraph today. Here's one from Reuters now, from Bliskovka. Reuters published another version of the peace plan from the EU, the size of the armed forces of Ukraine, 800,000. The Telegraph plan had no limits. Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant will be restarted under the supervision of the IAEA. The produced energy will be equally shared between Russia and Ukraine. The Telegraph wrote that the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant would remain with Ukraine. So you can see these different reports talking about different outcomes here. Telegraph saying that Ukraine would keep the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and now Reuters is saying that it will be shared equally between Ukraine and Russia. So you can see there's just so many different discrepancies here with these different outlets. NATO agrees not to permanently station its troops in Ukraine during peacetime. The Telegraph, Ukraine itself decides regarding foreign troops. Russia will be able to return to the G8. This point is not in the Telegraph report. Elections in Ukraine will be held as soon as possible after signing the peace agreement. The Telegraph has no point about elections. Ukraine will not use force to restore control over the occupied territory. And the Telegraph reports no use of force is foreseen only after Ukraine and Russia agree on all territorial issues. So you can see, different outcomes here based on the reports that you're reading. This is the one from Reuters, full text of European counterproposal to U.S. Ukraine peace plan. So as we mentioned earlier, with these conspiracies being passed around, take everything with a grain of salt right now, based on this peace plan. because this information, there's just so many discrepancies with all these different outlets. But I want to show you guys everything so that way you can see how these outlets are reporting this today. But we'll wait for that official plan to be released eventually. Here's more information now. Visioner, the core section of the U.S. peace framework document under discussion in Geneva, is reportedly nearing completion, according to RBC Ukraine. So RBC Ukraine is going to be a news outlet in Ukraine. They've got some information here also. Most provisions of the peace plan have already been coordinated with Ukraine, and a significant portion of the previously disputed issues has been refined. Here's the key points. The essential norms of the document have been agreed upon, while several contentious provisions have been partially resolved. Progress has been achieved on matters such as the size of Ukraine's armed forces, the status of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, format of prisoner exchanges, and the return of detainees. Issues related to territorial arrangements and guarantees of Ukraine's non-accession to NATO remain subject to direct negotiations between the presidents of Ukraine and the United States. So apparently, territorial exchanges and guarantees of Ukraine getting into NATO will be talked about between Zelenskyy and Trump. One of the most challenging elements of the draft remains the demand for the withdrawal of Ukrainian forces from Donetsk Oblast, a proposal Kyiv firmly rejects. A meeting between Zelenskyy and Trump is expected earlier this week or next. The United States also presented Ukraine with an additional security guarantee document containing 3 principal points. These are apparently them for security guarantees here. If Russia resumes offensive operations, the U.S. president would be authorized to deploy American troops to Ukraine. So talking about that possible NATO Article 5 type guarantee for Ukraine without them actually being involved in NATO. NATO, together with France, United Kingdom, Germany, Poland, and Finland, would commit to acting in full coordination with the U.S., so they would be responding as well, these European partners, and guarantees would remain in force for a period of 10 years. So we've been hearing about that there's some sort of plan, 10-year plan or security guarantee for Ukraine that would give somewhat like Article 5 style guarantees. So we're going to have to wait for more information on that. But there's more details there regarding this plan. Now, Clash report, the White House says peace talks in Geneva made major progress on Trump's draft plan to end the Russia-Ukraine war. Ukrainian delegates said their key concerns are security guarantees, sovereignty, navigation rights, and economic recovery were fully addressed, and that the revised draft now reflects Ukraine's national interests. Okay, so again, more information that we're hearing that this draft plan has been changed in more favor for Ukraine. So I wonder what will happen now when the U.S. goes over to Russia here in the next week or two. If they do, it'll probably get revised again, or we'll have Russia come out and say, we don't agree to this plan at all, which we are seeing some data on that today. I'll show you what the Russians are saying in just a moment. Now, next, Kyiv and Washington finalize new plan. The United States and Ukraine have quietly moved closer to a peace deal. The White House confirmed that the updated draft agreement must fully respect Ukraine's sovereignty. The document was refined after closed-door negotiations, and Kyiv thanked Washington and President Donald Trump personally for their efforts to end the war and save lives. Both sides are now working through the final details in the coming days. They will continue aligning their positions and stay in close contact with European partners to avoid any gaps in the approach. The final decision will rest with the presidents of Ukraine and the United States. Okay, so the heavy lifting looks like it's done for now in terms of negotiations between the U.S. and Ukraine. Now, the next steps are going to be, again, the White House is going to be meeting with the Russian officials, and then soon after that, that's probably when we'll have a meeting between Zelenskyy and Trump, or the meeting between Zelenskyy and Trump could come before the Russian delegation meets with the U.S., but so far it looks like this is moving towards supporting Ukraine and not so much Russia after these delegations have met between the U.S. and Ukraine. Now, Ukrainian Review, Trump's November 27 deadline is not stable, says Rubio. This statement by the U.S. Secretary of State is quoted by CNN. According to Marco Rubio, the deadline for signing the peace agreement that Trump has set for Ukraine could be significantly shifted. Here's a report today. Rubio indicates Thursday deadline for Ukraine to accept deal could shift. Okay, so what we're hearing is that this major deadline coming up on Thursday on Thanksgiving for Ukraine to sign this deal could be pushed back. I'm thinking it's going to be the case. I don't see Ukraine agreeing to this right away. We also got to see how the Russians are going to agree to it, unless Zelenskyy and Trump meet before Thanksgiving this week. and maybe they agree to something major. Maybe Ukraine will go ahead and sign this deal. We'll have to see, at least this altered deal, but I'm thinking it's going to get pushed back. You guys let me know what you think on that. Now, Max 25, U.S. officials said that Trump hasn't been as involved in the specifics, according to Washington Post. You tell him I'm going to try to get a deal, he will say, great, go see what you can do, and that's the level of detail he has. It's been absolute chaos all day because even different parts of the White House don't know what's going on. It's embarrassing. A European official said it seemed Washington was almost taken by surprise on the whole thing on Friday. Usually, when there's more to it, it feels different. Our feeling has been DC has been taken by surprise by Witkoff's actions, the official said. I have to agree with that. U.S. Ukraine agreed to change draft of peace plan that appeased Russia. Yeah, so we heard last week, when this plan came out, a lot of like top, U.S. senators and House representatives in Congress were so confused by this. They're like, where did this come from? It came completely out of left field. And Steve Witkoff and Kirill Dmitriev were apparently working on this deal behind the scenes, what we were hearing. Or maybe it was Marco Rubio and Steve Witkoff that were also working on this. It was just so many different stories coming out last week. A lot of different weird situations with this. But yeah, apparently, according to the Washington Post today, Trump doesn't even have a whole lot of his hand in the pie when it comes to this peace proposal. He barely understands the specifics of it. He's just waiting for his delegations to come up with some sort of plan, get it signed, and then he's going to put his signature on it, is how it seems. He doesn't really care the details of it. He just wants the war over, is what it looks like to me. Now, Max 25. Here's a quote here from Trump on True Social. I want to show you this to you guys. It says, is it really possible that big progress is being made in peace talks between Russia and Ukraine? Don't believe it until you see it, but something good just may be happening. God bless America. Yeah, this was Trump coming out, showing some insight to these talks. That possibly are we seeing big progress being made with these peace talks between Russia and Ukraine? We'll have to really see, but based on what we're seeing from the Russians today, I don't think we're going to have any signing of this deal. Even if Ukraine and the U.S. Go ahead and agree to this together, I don't see Russia agreeing to this amended peace plan that Ukraine has come out with, making all these big changes. So we're going to have to see what happens. Now, Kiev Post says, quote, we were at a critical moment now. There's a lot of noise in the media and a great deal of political pressure, Zelenskyy said about the U.S. peace plan. We'll continue working with our partners, primarily the United States, seeking compromises that strengthen us rather than weaken us. We will keep explaining how dangerous it is to pretend that aggression can be ignored as if everything has somehow resolved itself. Okay, so this was a statement from Zelenskyy today. Just saying that, it's a critical moment. It's a very important time right now. We'll see if this peace plan gets signed by Ukraine. Obviously, we still have to wait to see how the Russians are going to be responding to this also. But he's also, again, talking about how there's a lot of noise in the media. Okay, so there's a lot of talk, a lot of different information going around. This whole situation with this peace plan is actually changing very rapidly. There's new reports coming out like every 10 minutes, and new information is coming out regarding this. And the plans are the information appears to be changing very rapidly too. So that's why I said earlier, take everything with a grain of salt. Now, we're translated. The Ukrainian delegation is returning from Geneva. Zelenskyy is awaiting a report on the results of the peace plan negotiations. Here was Zelenskyy today. It says, spoke with the Prime Minister of Norway, Jonas Gahr Store. We discussed the diplomatic situation and bilateral cooperation. Thank you for the advice and support. Norway, as always, helps. I informed the Prime Minister about the initial results of the advisors' work in Geneva. Our delegation is now returning home, and I'm waiting for a full report this evening on the progress of the negotiations in Geneva and the key points from our partners. Based on the reports, we will decide on the next steps and timing. We will continue to coordinate with Europe and other partners around the world. We are counting on achieving the necessary results, and I'm grateful to everyone who stands with Ukraine. So there's an update from Zelenskyy also claiming that the Ukrainian delegation in Geneva is on their way back home. They're going to brief Zelenskyy, then they'll move forward with the next steps. Now, no reports. German Chancellor Merz stated there can be no peace plan for Ukraine without Europe's approval on matters affecting its interests and sovereignty. No deal moves forward without Europe's consent, he said. Okay, so we got Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, coming out and confirming that this plan will not move forward unless Europe can put in their 2 cents, right? We know that Europe has been backing Ukraine throughout the entirety of this war. They continue to do so today. And they want to make sure they have a say in anything before we have a signature from Ukraine to sign this deal with Russia. So that's Friedrich Merz confirming that again today. Now, Polymarket Intel. Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk stated that a final decision is nearing that could see seized Russian assets redirected towards Ukraine's reconstruction. So get ready for that. Maybe in the next few days, we could be hearing that Ukraine will be receiving a portion of these frozen Russian assets. There's about 300 billion sitting in banks in Europe right now, and we've been hearing that about 140 billion of that could be tapped into, handed over to Ukraine, and Russia will repay this loan that's given to Ukraine by these frozen Russian assets through reparations that Russia will pay to Ukraine in the future. So big news there. All right, now Max 25. Putin held a telephone conversation with Erdogan. Erdogan expressed his intention to provide every possible assistance to the negotiation process and his readiness to continue to make the Istanbul platform available for these purposes, the Kremlin reported. Yeah, so apparently Erdogan, the president of Turkey, had a phone call with Putin today, and he basically expressed to Putin that they are ready to support the peace process, allow these Russian and Ukrainian delegations to show back up in Istanbul again today if they want to begin the peace process and negotiations. So we'll see if that's going to be the case in the future, but we got Turkey expressing support to help end this war. Now, Max 25, Kremlin aide Ushakov says the U.S. plan on Ukraine will be subject to modifications by Russia, Ukraine, Europe, and the United States. Moscow has seen reports about a European plan on Ukraine. It is unconstructive, and does not suit Russia. Russia has received a signal from the United States to meet in person and begin discussions on the plan for Ukraine, but there are no concrete agreements yet. Okay, so no plans for Russia to be involved in these peace talks, but it talks about how they see the reports on the European plan for Ukraine, and they are not going to agree to it, is what this is stating from Yuri Ushakov. This is Putin's aide. This is what he stated today. Here's more information. Bliskovka. Moscow rejects any compromises in the peace plan on Ukraine. Russia cannot back down from its previous demands. Bild cites the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Okay, so Bild is going to be a magazine out of Germany. They're claiming today that Moscow has rejected any compromises on the peace plan for Ukraine, that they will not back down from their previous demands. So we know what their demands are, right? They want to control the Donbass. They want Ukraine's military destroyed, basically reduced to almost zero. They don't want Ukraine into NATO. We know all these major factors that they want to end this war, right? So apparently, according to this information today, Bild is reporting that Moscow has already rejected this peace plan. They're not going to move forward with it. And the fact that they're claiming today also they haven't made any plans to meet with, the United States or anything like that, that makes me think they're not going to agree to this. But let me know what you think. Now, Megatron Ron breaking. Ultimatum confirmed. U.S. threatened to halt all assistance to Ukraine if Zelenskyy refuses the proposed deal, according to ABC News. Ukrainian officials said this includes air defense missiles, intelligence sharing, and all other weapons and support commitments. So ABC News coming out today and just confirming that apparently this plan is true, that if Ukraine does not sign this proposal, whether it be by Thanksgiving or after, that we will see the U.S. withdrawing support. But we did hear that it would be by Thanksgiving, this coming Thursday, that if it is not signed, the U.S. is withdrawing all military support for Ukraine, including intelligence sharing. We'll see if that's going to be the case coming up this week. Now, NOL reports strikes hit several sites in Crimea overnight. A group of drones targeted the Brom plant in Krasno-Perekopsk, damaging production halls, with one of them taking heavy damage. More drones hit the Glebovskoye underground gas storage facility in Nukovo, destroying its compressor building. Another strike reached a Simferopol oil depot, but the impact there appears limited. Apparently, some Russian Telegram channels were reporting some strikes inside of Crimea overnight. We had a Brom plant that was attacked, and then we also had a underground gas storage facility that Ukraine bombed using drones overnight. No pictures or videos coming out on this. We just wanted to share that information coming out from Telegram sources from the Russians overnight. Now here's video from Tartargami, UA. Multiple loud explosions were reported in Kostovo in Russia's Nizhny Novgorod Oblast, with some captured on video. Ukraine has previously targeted the Lukoil refinery in Kostovo. Location and timing of the footage has not been independently verified. Here's video coming out from Nizhny Novgorod and Kostovo. Possible attacks on the Kostovo oil refinery over here. We've seen this before. Take a look at this video, just 4 seconds. All right, so what we heard there was some sort of explosion, probably a drone attacking this area, and could have been a drone attack on the local refinery over here. I think it's been at least 3 or 4 times we heard reports of the Kostovo oil refinery coming under attack in the Nizhny Novgorod region. I'll wait for more details on that, but nothing yet. Also, no reports air defense systems are active in the Moscow region tonight. Local channels reports multiple explosions. So if you look at the dates here, November 24th, it's at 6 a.m. So this would have been late into the afternoon over inside of the Moscow region of Russia. And over the weekend, going into Sunday morning from Saturday night, we had reports that there was a major power plant that came under attack by Ukraine over there. Apparently, they could be attacking the Moscow region again today, because it looks like what we're seeing here in this video is a Russian air defense interceptor that was going up in the skies to probably take down a Ukrainian drone. So Ukraine's been attacking the capital a lot recently in the last couple days. Now, NOL reports Russia has imposed a 24/7 flight ban over the Kapustin Yar test site until November 30th, likely for missile trials. Monitoring suggests possible launch of the Oreshnik ballistic missile. If trajectories pose a threat to Ukraine, air raid alerts may follow. So this is not good to hear. Apparently till November 30th, starting today for the next 6 days, the Russians could be testing some missiles over here at the Kapustin Yar test site. I believe this is in the Astrakhan region of Russia. So hopefully we're not going to see a launch of the Oreshnik missile into Ukraine like what we saw back in November of 2024. Obviously, that did not have a legitimate warhead on it, but maybe the next one could. We keep hearing that one of these could be fired into Ukraine in the future. So not sure why the Russians are closing down the airspace over here at the Kapustin Yar test site, but be ready for any missile tests over here or possible attacks on Ukraine. Now, Vicegrad 24, Ukraine's defense minister Denis Shmyhal has confirmed that Sweden has paid for 400 long-range suicide drones to be produced in Ukraine and used to strike targets deep in Russia. So this may not seem like a lot, 400 long-range drones, but hey, that's great for Sweden to be helping out with that. They have purchased 400 long-range attack drones for Ukraine for them to use to strike targets inside of Russian territory. This could be at least, 2 or 3 days worth of drones just to help out Ukraine. So good news there. Now, NOL reports Czech firm Reactive Drone is under criminal investigation after selling Chinese drones to Ukraine at up to 20 times the purchase price, raking in over $32 million. The firm now faces tax fraud charges, accused of dodging at least $5.2 million in taxes and wiring most of the profit back to China. Authorities have frozen assets worth $16 million. So I was thinking about this. I was like, who is it that was buying these drones at such an inflated price to begin with? But at the same time, imagine this Czech firm selling these drones at a very inflated price over to the Ukrainians, while at the same time, these Ukrainians are over here fighting to defend their lives. That's just insane that anybody would profit off of this war in that kind of a way, right? Obviously, we need to support Ukraine. But at the same time, I mean, racking up the price of these drones and trying to take advantage of the situation, that's just very cold, in my opinion, for someone to do something like that. But apparently this Czech firm has been caught and they're being investigated right now. Now, War Translated. Russian war correspondent writes that North Korean soldiers will likely fight near Huliapol, if I'm saying the name of that right, in the Zaporizhzhia direction. That's the southern side of Ukraine. Here's a report from Condottiero. After 2 months at the training grounds, representatives of friendly DPRK arrived at the front. Guess the direction. It says there is a field there and you can walk around. So apparently multiple sources on X reporting this today, that there could be North Korean soldiers showing up on the front lines in the Zaporizhzhia region. Now, we haven't heard too many reports of North Korean soldiers inside the war in Ukraine, inside of Ukraine in general. But we'll wait for more information. If we can get some reports that North Korean soldiers are now in the Zaporizhzhia region, we could see potentially a few thousand of them showing up down there. There have been some reports that the North Koreans have been sending some people over to Russia to help out with what they call demining operations, but we know those could also be soldiers that will be on the ground to help the Russians, right, in this war. So wait for more details on that. Very interesting there. Now, Bliskavka in Poland, the third suspect in the railway sabotage case, Ukrainian citizen Volodymyr B., was arrested. He's accused of aiding and abetting sabotage in the interests of Russia's special services. According to the prosecutor's office, he drove his accomplice to the site where the latter conducted reconnaissance and chose a spot to plant explosives. The court remanded the suspect in custody, and the investigation is ongoing. All right, so what we're hearing now is that there's a third suspect involved. Last week, with these attacks onto Polish railway systems, we had reports of some being blown up. There was almost a case where we had a train that was actually derailed that could have been packed with Polish citizens. So now we're hearing that there is a third suspect that has been arrested now, and apparently he was helping out drive some of the other accomplices around to set up these bombs and put them on these tracks to blow them up. Crazy information. From what I understand, two more of them are also on the run that fled back into Belarus, and right now the Polish authorities are trying to call on Belarus to have them extradited back to Poland. Now, next up, NATO strengthens its foothold in Finland, a new headquarters right next to Russia. Finnish Defense Minister Antti Hakkarainen has confirmed that the country plans to host a permanent NATO command unit. The new structure will become part of the alliance's operational command system led from Norfolk, USA. The final decision is expected at the NATO defense ministers meeting in February 2026. According to Hakkarainen, the new headquarters will significantly boost NATO's existing structures in Finland and link them directly with the national command system. In practice, this means one thing: Finland is becoming a full-fledged northern hub of NATO with the alliance, and the alliance is establishing a permanent presence right on Russia's doorstep. Okay, this is big news. So we've been actually hearing about this, that NATO was planning to put a northern hub or a command center inside of Finland, which would be right on the border of Russia. It looks like that is confirmed now. So a new headquarters is being set up over there. And I wonder how Russia's going to respond to this. I mean, they don't like having NATO on their doorstep, but at the same time, when they attacked Ukraine, that's when Sweden and Norway both decided to join the NATO alliance to protect themselves from any future attack from Russia after what they saw the Russians doing inside of Ukraine. So yeah, I'm sure Russia's not going to be happy with this, with a NATO command center being set up right on their doorstep. Let me know how you feel on that story today. Now, Max 25, Ukrainian air defense shot down or suppressed 125 out of 162 drones. Okay, so pretty large attack onto Ukraine overnight. Man, it's been well over like 110, 120 per day that we're starting to see drones going into Ukraine from the Russian side. In this case, 162 and 125 of those were shot down. So although we're seeing a lot of drones going into Ukraine, we're still seeing very good numbers of destruction here, 125 out of 162. Now, Kyiv Independent, these are the indicative estimates of Russia's combat losses as of November 24th, according to the Armed Forces of Ukraine. In our final update, Russia's losses as of November 24th, 1,190 troops, 5 AFVs, 84 vehicles and fuel tanks, 3 tanks, 41 artillery systems, 431 UAVs, and it looks like that is it. Okay, so no anti-aircraft warfare system destroyed overnight or multiple launch rocket system, but we had 41 artillery systems. These numbers starting to jump back up again. They've been closer to around 15 recently. Tanks and AFVs, I guess, up a little bit. These numbers have been closer to 1 or 2 for each of these categories, 5 and 3 there. Vehicles and fuel tanks, about average numbers. And then troop losses, up a little bit more today than usual. We've been seeing on average 900 to 1,000, upwards of almost 1,200 today. So guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in for today's update on November 24th, 2025. Hope you all have a great day out there. Let me know what you think about all these details down below in the comment section. That's going to be it for today's update. If you got something out of this, please smash that like button. Also, if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing down below. Hit the notification bell. That way YouTube can notify you. And with that, hope you all have a great day. Everybody take care and God bless. And we'll see you in the next one.